Open a textbook on Buddhism and you'll find this really elegant atheistic philosophy of radical self-reliance.
Right, exactly.
I mean, there is no creator deity in the sky, no divine judge, and no eternal soul to be saved. You are supposed to liberate yourself by realizing the ultimate emptiness of reality. But travel across Asia tomorrow, and that straight line from the rulebook to the real world just completely shatters.
Oh, the contrast is genuinely jarring.
It really is. I mean, you'll see a woman in northern Thailand offering a lit stick of incense and an open bottle of orange Fanta to the invisible spirits living in her garden.
Yeah.
You travel to Tibet, and you see hundreds of pilgrims prostrating themselves in waves on the pavement before a golden statue, with tears just streaming down their faces. Down in Sri Lanka, massive shoulder-to-shoulder crowds are drumming and chanting for an ancient relic, literally a tiny piece of a tooth.
Right, the tooth relic.
And in China, you'll find an elderly man rapidly clicking through prayer beads, chanting the name of Amitabha Buddha 10,000 times a day, fully believing that this specific chant will literally save him when he dies.
It's wild. 5 different countries, 5 completely different practices, all existing under an umbrella that technically claims there are no gods to save you.
Yeah, and that contradiction is basically our entire mission for this deep dive. We're going to map out what is essentially the invisible pantheon of Buddhism.
I love that phrasing.
Thanks. We're diving into the massive, fascinating gap between the godless teachings of Buddhist philosophy and the rich, complex folk worship and devotion that is actually practiced by millions of human beings every single day.
Because unpacking that gap reveals so much more than just religious trivia. It fundamentally exposes how human psychology actually functions when confronted with suffering, hope, and, just basic survival.
Definitely. So if you've ever watched a travel documentary or visited a temple and felt confused seeing someone bow down to a statue in a religion that supposedly has no God, we are going to completely reframe how you see religious practice, devotion, and even the hidden layers of your own mind.
To start making sense of this, we first have to clear a massive hurdle called the translation gap.
Right.
Before we can understand who all these people are praying to, we have fundamentally understand what they're actually doing. Western observers almost always stumble right here.
Because we kind of instinctively apply our own cultural software to a completely different operating system.
Precisely. If you are raised in or, heavily influenced by an Abrahamic framework, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, the word prayer carries a highly specific definition.
Yeah, very specific one.
The target of a prayer is a supreme creator,
right.
A singular God possessing the power to intervene directly in human affairs. And the mechanism of that prayer is basically a petition. You are making a request, please heal my mother, or please help me secure this job.
And taking that definition and pasting it onto Buddhism just breaks the entire system.
It totally does. In the Buddhist framework, the target is entirely different. Practitioners aren't speaking to a cosmic creator. They are building a relationship with an awakened state of mind, or sometimes negotiating with highly localized earthly spirits.
Okay.
More importantly, the mechanism isn't a petition. It is mental training. It serves as a focal orientation for your own mind, generating this positive psychological momentum. So prayer transforms from a request into an active relationship.
Hold on, that sounds very intellectually elegant, but I need to push back here for a second.
Sure, go for it.
If you aren't asking the creator God for a favor, why are you physically putting your forehead on the floor in front of a giant golden statue? Like, what is the actual point of the physical devotion?
That's a great question. That physical devotion actually serves 4 distinct, highly pragmatic psychological functions.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first is gratitude. You aren't worshiping a creator who demands subservience. You are honoring a teacher. You are acknowledging the historical figure who navigated an incredibly difficult path and managed to leave a map behind for everyone else.
Oh, almost like saluting a brilliant scientist who cured a disease, rather than worshiping them as a deity.
Yeah, that's a perfect analogy. The second function is aspiration. The object you're bowing to inevitably shapes who you become.
Right.
The statue is not actually the Buddha. The statue acts as a mirror, reflecting the enlightenment that is currently dormant within you. You are basically physically training your nervous system to aim at that specific target.
That makes a lot of sense.
Third is merit. The act of generous devotion, whether offering a lotus flower or bowing, generates positive karmic energy. Not because the statue somehow receives the flower, but because the physical act of generosity actively shapes your mind toward openness, rather than a closed-off selfishness.
Okay, and the fourth function?
Ritual memory. The physical act directs your scattered attention. Every single time your knees hit the floor, you anchor an abstract philosophy into a physical, embodied reality. It stops the teachings from just being, ideas floating around in your intellect.
So it's not submission at all. It's a highly structured psychological workout.
Exactly.
That actually brings up the merit part you mentioned, which I found totally fascinating in the sources. People aren't just making merit to hoard for themselves. There is this deeply ingrained concept of merit transfer.
Yes, pariyamana or padadana, depending on the tradition.
Right. The best way I can picture it's like generating karmic electricity.
Karmic electricity, I like that. Expand on how that mechanism works.
Well, in the Western model, if your grandmother falls severely ill, you pray and beg a supreme God to intervene and save her. You hope God decides to grant a miracle. But the Buddhist model of merit transfer gives you a completely different role.
A much more active one.
Yeah. You, the practitioner, perform a generous action. You chant, you meditate, you feed a monk. That action acts like a generator, creating a surge of positive karmic electricity. Then, you formally and intentionally wire that energy away from yourself, directing it straight to your grandmother's spiritual account.
The psychological brilliance of that mechanism is how beautifully it ritualizes human grief and helplessness.
Yeah, it really does.
When someone you love is suffering or has recently passed away, the most overwhelming emotion is usually guilt. The feeling of, I didn't do enough, or I am completely powerless to help them now. Merit transfer restores absolute agency.
Because you're actually doing something.
Exactly. You are doing something tangible in the present moment that actively contributes to their spiritual well-being. It maintains the relationship of care across the boundary of distance or, even death.
It takes this vast, abstract philosophy and gives it immense, beating heart, emotional utility. But that begs a huge question. If you are generating this karmic electricity, who are you wiring it to? Because the historical Buddha is gone. He exited the system completely.
You're touching on the hierarchy of who or what is receiving this devotion, because it is not a flat landscape at all. There is a very specific 3-layered architecture to the Buddhist universe.
Let's break down those layers, because this is where the Pantheon really opens up.
So layer 1 is philosophical Buddhism. The ultimate. This is the atheistic doctrine you read about in university textbooks: emptiness, self-liberation, the realization that the self is an illusion.
Right, the baseline stuff.
And then layer 2 is devotional Buddhism, the infrastructure. This is where you find the celestial Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, the Pure Lands, and the intricate merit-making systems. Finally, layer 3 is folk Buddhism, the earthly. This is the realm of local spirits, animism, magic, and immediate worldly needs like rainfall and physicist safety.
I want to zoom in on layer 2 for a second, the infrastructure. While the historical Buddha, Shakyamuni, never claimed to be a god, the Mahayana tradition introduces a massive roster of other celestial Buddhas.
They absolutely do.
Looking through that roster, the analogy that immediately came to my mind was a modern healthcare system.
A healthcare system. Walk me through that.
Think about it. When you have a highly specific, terrible medical issue, you don't just go to a general practitioner and say, fix me. You seek out a specialist. That's exactly what these celestial Buddhas function as. You don't just go to the Buddha for everything. You go to the precise specialist for your exact problem.
That framing aligns perfectly with how the traditions operate. Take the Medicine Buddha by Sajaguru. He is typically depicted with glowing, lapis lazuli blue skin holding a bowl of healing nectar. A practitioner doesn't usually go to him for ultimate philosophical enlightenment first. They go to him when facing a terminal diagnosis, when dealing with chronic pain, or when the doctors deliver the news that nothing more can be done.
The psychological function there is wild. Visualizing that intense blue light isn't about ignoring medical science. It creates a mental sanctuary for healing. It hands agency back to a patient who has just been told they are helpless.
Yes. Then you have Amitabha Buddha, the specialist of salvation. He serves as the focus of Pure Land Buddhism, which is massively popular across East Asia.
Oh yeah, the chanting we mentioned earlier.
Exactly. His specialty involves offering rebirth in a perfect celestial realm, a pure land, where enlightenment is virtually guaranteed. Amitabha exists for the ordinary person, the farmer, the merchant, the exhausted parent who simply cannot abandon their life to meditate in a monastery for 8 hours a day.
Right, they just don't have the time.
The practice requires incredible sincerity, but is mechanically simple. Repeatedly chant his name.
It's basically the ultimate democratization of enlightenment. But even these celestial Buddhas can feel a little distant, a bit too cosmic. Which brings us to the beings who serve as the true emotional core of Layer 2, the Bodhisattvas.
Bodhisattvas represent compassion with a deeply human face. These are beings who reach the absolute threshold of enlightenment. They possess the key to exit the cycle of suffering forever, but they stopped at the door.
Wow.
Yeah, they made a radical vow to delay their own ultimate liberation until every other suffering being is saved first.
And they are beautifully, hyper-specifically tailored to human needs, like Guanyin or Avalokitesvara, the Mother of Mercy.
Yes, very famous.
She is often depicted with 1,000 arms and an eye on every single palm. The symbolism is striking. She needs to see every specific instance of suffering across the globe, and she needs 1,000 different tools to reach out and pull you out of the fire immediately.
Exactly.
You pray to her when you are in sudden physical danger, like a storm at sea or traveling a dangerous road. She provides a maternal, intimate, and instant comfort.
And in the Tibetan tradition, you find Tara, the swift savior. Her defining characteristic is unrelenting speed.
She gets things done fast.
She does. She appears in 21 color-coded forms designed to combat incredibly specific human fears. Green Tara acts to quickly remove worldly obstacles, white Tara focuses on longevity and healing, and black Tara steps in to destroy things that gentle compassion alone cannot fix.
My personal favorite has to be Kantigarbha, known as Jizo in Japan, the Hell Worker.
Ah, yes.
His vow is so metal, until hell is empty, I will not become a Buddha. He literally descends into the lowest, darkest realms of existence to rescue beings. During Ghost Month, this is the figure you pray to if you are agonizing over a relative who died in a tragic, violent, or angry way.
Yeah.
You are essentially asking the Hell Worker to go find them in the dark and bring them peace.
The psychological relief that provides to a grieving family is just immense. But, this introduces a crucial friction point. Compassion and future salvation are profoundly beautiful concepts, but human beings live in a dangerous, unpredictable physical world. Sometimes you face earthly threats that are completely terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, you cannot whisper softly to a deadly hailstorm that is destroying your only crop. You can't be gentle with an invading army or a plague.
Which is exactly why we slide from Layer 2 into what we could almost call Layer 2.5, the security detail, the Dharmapalas.
This security detail, I love that.
These are the fierce protectors, beings like Mahakala, who is depicted as pitch black, with 6 arms, wearing a necklace of freshly severed human heads and trampling demons under his feet.
Oh.
Or Palden Lemo, who rides her mule across a boiling sea of blood. To an untrained Western eye, these look exactly like demons.
But they are the good guys.
They absolutely are. The operating principle here is wrathful compassion. The ferocity of the protector must exactly match the terrifying intensity of the suffering or the obstacle it is facing.
Because if a wild dog is attacking a child, a loving mother doesn't act peacefully. She acts with terrifying, explosive violence, completely motivated by love.
Right. It provides profound psychological security. When a practitioner is meditating or simply trying to live a moral life in a chaotic, unfair world, the mind needs reassurance. It needs to know there's a terrifying bouncer at the door keeping the ultimate chaos at bay.
When I was looking into these protectors, a lot of them look awfully familiar.
Yeah.
Like Hindu gods. It seems Buddhism basically ran a corporate acquisition strategy in ancient India. It's genius.
The corporate analogy fits perfectly. Walk through how they managed that integration.
So Buddhism expands into India and encounters these massive, culturally entrenched Hindu gods. Instead of declaring your gods are fake, don't worship them, which historically just causes massive religious wars, Buddhism essentially buys the company.
Right.
They keep the old gods on staff, but demote them to middle management.
It's a masterful theological flex.
So you take Ganesha, the elephant-headed god who removes obstacles. Millions of people already worshipped him. Buddhism approaches and says, great news, Ganesha is real. He is super powerful, but he is not enlightened. He's still bound by the laws of karma, just like us. He's just a really powerful security guard.
Yeah.
And they rewrite the lore. So Ganesha bows to the new CEO, the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha. Even Brahma, the ultimate creator god of Hinduism. In the ancient Buddhist texts, Brahma physically bows down and begs the Buddha to teach.
That acquisition strategy perfectly illustrates the transition to Layer 3 folk Buddhism, the deeply earthly realities. Buddhism expands by absorbing local beliefs, it rarely replaces them.
Which brings us right back to that Thai grandmother from our opening.
Right.
The one offering a bottle of orange Fanta to the garden spirits while simultaneously wearing 3 Buddhist amulets.
Exactly. Viewed through a rigid, Western monotheistic lens, she appears deeply confused about her own religion. But she isn't confused in the slightest.
She just has a much better toolbox.
She understands the cosmic assignment, the local land spirits, the animistic forces that inhabited the forests long before Buddhism arrived. They have earthly appetites. They like sweet drinks. They handle the immediate, localized neighborhood issues, the weather, the fertility of the soil, the bumps in the night.
The day-to-day stuff.
Right. The celestial Buddhas handle ultimate liberation from the cycle of rebirth. You don't use a delicate screwdriver to hammer in a heavy nail.
It's like the Nagas, the ancient snake spirits. They're venerated for bringing rain and agricultural fertility.
Yeah.
Even the Buddha himself, in the oldest stories, was shielded from a massive storm by a giant Naga king who spread his hood like an umbrella.
Yeah, the imagery is beautiful.
Or look at Japan, where Buddhism completely merged with the native Shinto religion. A person goes to the Shinto kami to secure a good business deal or ensure safe childbirth, and then they go to the Buddhist Bodhisattvas to ensure a peaceful afterlife.
It creates a completely seamless ecosystem, but we have to address how all this abstract philosophy actually anchors into the physical world. We've discussed cosmic Buddhas and invisible garden spirits. But human psychology is incredibly stubborn. Concepts like emptiness or nirvana are notoriously difficult to hold on to. A regular person needs physical proof, something they can actually touch.
The human bridges, the tangible artifacts of the impossible.
Exactly. To make the impossible accessible, you see 3 distinct physical bridges. The first is ancient relics.
Like the Buddha's tooth we mentioned in Kandy, Sri Lanka.
Yes. The relic is kept protected inside nested golden caskets. The belief is that merely laying your eyes on the outermost casket brings immense merit. The human mind struggles with the abstract concept of enlightenment. But a physical piece of bone, that proves a biological human being actually achieved this state. It renders enlightenment physically touchable.
Which is taken to the absolute extreme with the second bridge, the Soka Shimbutsu, the self-mummified monks in Japan.
This represents a radical, arduous practice. Monks engaged in years of extreme dietary restriction, literally starving themselves of moisture, drinking toxic tree sap to preserve their tissues, and then sealing themselves in underground stone tombs to meditate until they passed away.
Wait, really? Toxic sap?
Yes. The ultimate goal was to prove, through the incorruptibility of their physical body centuries later, that absolute spiritual mastery over the flesh is genuinely possible.
It is simultaneously horrifying and completely awe-inspiring. You look at a mummified figure still sitting upright in the lotus position hundreds of years later, and it's undeniably real. It forces you to reckon with their mastery.
It definitely does.
And then the third bridge is much less morbid, but just as powerful living lineages.
The power isn't just relegated to the ancient past. It's the Thai taxi driver tapping a worn photograph of the famous forest monk Ajahn Chah on his dashboard for protection before merging into chaotic traffic. The photograph functions as a protective amulet. An unbroken lineage of living masters proves that the spiritual software still runs flawlessly today.
Seeing all these physical bridges, the mummies, the amulets, the relics, makes me wonder how the different institutions actually hold this together. Because a monk in Sri Lanka surely processes all this layered devotion differently than a monk in Tibet, right?
The underlying mechanisms operate very differently depending on the region. Let's look at the sectarian software. In Theravada Buddhism, dominant in Southeast Asia, the approach is best described as a parallel process.
So the tracks just never cross.
They are kept conceptually distinct. Layer 1, the philosophical pursuit of ultimate liberation, remains the strict domain of the monastic meditation hall. Layer 3, the worldly devotion involving amulets, tattoos, and spirit houses, is handled simultaneously out in the village, sometimes even by monks performing specific protective chants. But philosophically, they keep the ultimate truth and the worldly magic in separate categories.
Then you have Mahayana Buddhism, which is dominant in East Asia. They employ a concept called skillful means, or upaya.
Mahayana openly embraces devotional Buddhism as a highly functional tool. They don't try to hide the gap between doctrine and practice, they utilize it.
Okay, how so?
The operating philosophy is pragmatic. Whatever form helps you, whether that's chanting to a pure land, or bowing to a thousand-armed goddess, if it suits your current spiritual capacity and eventually leads you closer to realizing emptiness, you should absolutely use it.
It's incredibly pragmatic. But then we get to Vajrayana, Tibetan Buddhism, and I have to admit, I hit a complete wall in my reading. It looks like total polytheism to me.
It does seem that way.
You have practitioners vividly visualizing these incredibly complex deities with different colored faces, holding specific weapons. How does that fit into an atheistic model at all?
It is easily the most radical approach of the three. It appears like polytheism on steroids, but the core mechanism is entirely different. It's a practice called deity yoga. It is essentially using the illusion to destroy the illusion.
Wait, how does visualizing a god destroy an illusion?
In deity yoga, you do not sit down and pray to a separate deity up in the sky. You sit down, and through intensely rigorous visualization, you generate the image of the deity right in front of you. You hold every single detail in your mind, every color, every weapon, every jewel. Then you invite the actual wisdom of that deity to merge with your constructed visualization.
Okay, up to this point, it still sounds like a very intense version of normal prayer.
Here is the massive pivot. Step 3. The visualization dissolves into you. You become the deity. Your normal, anxious, limited human ego is temporarily overwritten and replaced by an enlightened template. You sit, act, think, and radiate compassion exactly as that deity.
Oh, wow. You are literally downloading and running the software of a god.
Precisely. But then comes step 4, the most crucial part, dissolution. The deity, which is now you, dissolves entirely into absolute emptiness.
Wait, really? So you build this incredibly intricate mental architecture just to completely collapse it?
Yes. You use the intense dualistic devotion of God and worshiper as the exact combustible fuel needed to completely burn away your own ego. Prayer transforms from a humble petition into a visceral recognition of non-duality. It uses the human psychological need for gods to ultimately prove that you do not need gods.
That is mind-blowing. Synthesizing all of this, we have these 3 layers: the pure philosophy, the intense devotion, and the earthly folk magic. It hit me that we are essentially looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
It is the perfect analytical lens for understanding why these seemingly contradictory layers coexist so seamlessly within a single practitioner. Think about the base of Maslow's pyramid. Humans require physical survival and basic safety. Food, shelter, protection from the elements.
Which maps perfectly to layer 3. The local folk spirits, the Nagas ensuring the rain falls, the terrifying Dharmapalas keeping the invading armies and demons at bay.
Move one step up the pyramid and humans desperately need belonging, love, and emotional security.
That's layer 2. The Bodhisattvas, the mother of mercy. The merit transfer that allows you to process your crushing grief and stay actively connected to your deceased grandmother. It's the feeling of community when a massive crowd chants together.
Finally, at the very peak of Maslow's pyramid is self-actualization. The profound existential questions: who am I? What is the true nature of reality?
And there sits layer 1, the atheistic philosophy, the silent meditation on emptiness, the pursuit of ultimate liberation.
The psychological masterstroke of Buddhism is its recognition that human beings are multi-tiered creatures.
Definitely.
Why does a Japanese office worker meditate on the impermanence of the self in the morning, light incense to a celestial bodhisattva for his sick mother on his lunch break, and leave a cup of water for the Shinto kami protecting his house at night? Because he requires all of it to function. Remove any single layer and the system becomes incomplete. It stops serving the entirety of the human experience.
Yeah, if you only have cold philosophy, it's too dry for when your heart is completely broken by a terminal diagnosis. If you only have devotion, you lose the ultimate truth of the entire system. You need different tools for different realities.
Exactly.
Which is an incredible reminder for anyone listening, whether you are trying to pierce the veil of ultimate reality or you just really, really need a good outcome in your 9 a.m. meeting tomorrow. Human nature demands a full toolbox.
We are complex, contradictory creatures, and any resilient system must reflect that exact complexity.
Which leaves us with one final, incredibly provocative thought. We talked about how ultimately all this external devotion points inward. There's a brilliant quote from the 13th century Zen master Dogen: "To study the Buddha way is to study the self. Study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be enlightened by all things."
If the ultimate target of all this Buddhist devotion, the bowing, the chanting, the burning incense, is actually the discovery of your own awakened nature, well, it forces a profound question. What happens to the very concept of worship when the strict line between the worshiper on the floor and the worship statue on the altar completely dissolves?
It makes you wonder, Forget about golden statues in Asia for a second. Think about your own daily life. What are your habits, your rituals, your own personal prayers actually cultivating inside your own mind? Are they rigidly building up your ego, or are they slowly breaking it down?
That is the real question.
Because at the end of the day, when you look past the rigid textbook definitions and you see that woman offering Fanta to the garden spirits, or the pilgrim weeping before the altar, they aren't confused. They are simply using every single tool available to navigate the beautiful, incredibly messy reality of being human.
And that lived reality is far more profound than a simple textbook could ever hope to capture.